meeting to order, and we'll start with Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we'll move on to the roll call.
Andy Mary,
Yes.
Jim Balzer,
Here.
Dr. Dave Bardo,
Here.
Dr. Noel Deep,
Yep.
Jill Maddock Nelson,
Here.
Mary Newfeld,
Here.
Danny Hyatt,
Here.
Katie Schrader,
I'm on the
Angel Zimmerman,
Here.
Okay, and we'll go on to public comment.
I'm sorry I didn't get this on the agenda, so because we just found out. Darlene, can you come up here, please? You, Darlene Jansen, school nurse. Why? I didn't do it yet. So tomorrow is School Nurses Day with the state of Wisconsin. And so we have a proclamation commemorating School Nurses Day, and especially with this last year, you have done fabulously in keeping our students and the staff safe, and we really appreciate it. But I'm going to read the proclamation to you. So, State of Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction proclamation. Whereas students learn best in an environment that promotes social, emotional, and physical well-being and removes barriers to learning, and whereas students face complex and life-threatening health problems requiring care in school, and whereas school nurses address home and community factors, e.g. social determinants, impacting students' health by acting as a liaison to the school community, families, and healthcare providers on behalf of children's health by promoting wellness and improving health outcomes for Wisconsin's children. And whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has emphasized the essential role school nurses play in public and community health, providing leadership, guidance, epidemiological-based interventions, and whereas school nurses support the physical and mental health and educational success of children and youth by providing the link between health and learning, and are in a position to make positive differences for children every day. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Carolyn Stanford Taylor, State Superintendent of Public Instruction, declare Wednesday, May 12, 2021 as School Nurse Day to celebrate and acknowledge the efforts of school nurses in meeting the needs of Wisconsin students. School Nurse Day championing the whole student. So thank you so much for everything that you do. Oh, we're getting Okay, I'm going to cry.
Thank you. And Darlene, for all the work you do. And we'll go on to Avery Koblings.
Hi everyone, I'm Avery Koblings. I'm the junior year advisor for student council at the high school. I just wanted to take a second to come here and thank every one of the board members, both current and former, that worked so hard with my students, being open to their advances with opening up prom and having one this year. They had a wonderful time. We had really good turnout, and it meant a lot to them to be able to have it. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we will go on to the COVID update.
Okay, for temporary remote learners this week, 2 at East, 3 at North, 1 at West, 3 at the middle school, and 1 at the high school, for a total of 10, which we haven't had a number like that since early April. So, and also you can see an upload there from DHS, just a reminder of what we can be doing to continue mitigating the spread of COVID. And to date, we've had 1 letter, the board received 1 letter from a community member about masks, and then 1 from a parent regarding masks being optional at graduation. And you'll see that in the agenda later tonight. You'll be asked to vote on that item. So really, that's it for the COVID update. Dr. McKenna and Darlene are ready to share any additional information or recommendations they may have. So at this time, I'll turn it over to you.
Julie, you'd like us to discuss regarding the graduation
Sure.
and masking?
Sure, your recommendation, please.
So I reviewed recently the CDC recommendations, and the recommendations for large gatherings, in, outdoor gatherings where people might be closer together, is to wear masks. So that's the recommendation, and I think it makes sense and is reasonable and appropriate. And certainly, the CDC has been updating their guidelines on a regular basis and reviewing things. Small gatherings, outdoor gatherings generally are safer, but when you're talking about massive events where there could be over 500 people, they would recommend caution. So as you all might be aware, we've had a rise in cases in the county. We have more illnesses in the hospital than we've had, say, in March or February. This is a condition that does affect people. It kills them, or it can cause severe illness. So I think it would be very reasonable to proceed as planned with masks, required for the ceremony.
Patrick, I saw the letter from the health department, and it said there's no variance in Lake County. Is that still true?
No variance, Darlene? Can you speak to that?
I tried, they were unable to give me that information today. I did ask. They were not able to identify the specific variants that we have. They've not had any, they haven't had like the California or the UK variant or the South African. They've not had any of those specific variants at this point that they've had identified in Lake County. That was of last week.
Okay.
Dr. D, does the hospital check for variants at this point?
Not regularly.
That's what I thought.
No.
So there certainly would be situations where patients might come into a Spirus hospital with COVID, and we might not get that information because we have our internal system for testing for coronavirus.
So when the health department reports out no variants were detected in the county, that's actually not necessarily true or false then?
Exactly. So there's a degree of uncertainty about that. Cases that are tested via the health department do go to the state lab.
They don't test.
Oh, they don't test?
No. Only as virus tests here in Lake County.
Then it would be very unlikely that we would have information of variants here in the county because we're doing
You
our
have to
testing.
request for it, Patrick?
What's that?
You have to request it when I've had patients, I have sent them down, and then if you don't hear from them, basically it's negative, otherwise they will catch it.
Thank you, Neil.
Can you share a little bit more about the increase in cases? I reviewed the cases over April and May, so I'm interested in, can you speak a little bit more about when the increase took place or is currently, or?
Well, there's changes in terms of, there are two aspects of that. There's increase in hospitalizations, and there's an increase in cases. So the increase in cases typically occurs before hospitalizations. So about 2 weeks ago, we did see an uptick in cases, where at least at the hospital, looking at the hospital data, we were at or above 10% for infection rate. Typically, hospitalizations lag that, and so you will see cases come in of people being sick in the hospital who maybe were tested earlier, or cases are going down, but you actually see a rise in hospitalizations after you see the initial increase in the cases.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Darlene?
Okay, I do have one more thing to add as far as the COVID goes. We are going to be proceeding with COVID testing, doing the antigen testing in the school district next year. In order to be able to do that, we needed a CLIA certification and waiver. That's the Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendment certification. And we've got the certificate of waiver. We received that already. They've already accepted our application. We're just waiting for fee payment, and then federal government will be sending us our certificate. This waiver, certificate of waiver, makes it possible for school districts to do testing that is FDA approved for basically home use. They have very simple instructions. They're very simple to do. the risk of erroneous results are extremely low. And if the test is done incorrectly, there's a very, very low risk of harm to the person. So that's why we have been able to get the waiver, the certification of waiver. So right now, I actually can order supplies if we wanted to even start it during summer school, but it's up to whatever everybody feels. Otherwise, we do plan on making sure we start doing the testing. If the reason we want to do the testing is, number one, it will identify positive cases quicker. And we can start the contact tracing, and we can make sure that it's just an added blanket of protection to all the students in the school. So we'll be able to start that quicker. If they come back negative and they're symptomatic, we would still ask that the parent do the PCR, or they would fit within our protocol as we have it now, if that's what we choose to do once school starts again. So another thought that Dr. McKenna had was and of course this would all be done with parent approval. We couldn't just test. And so this summer we'll be talking to determine what's the best way to get that approval, whether it's a consent form that goes home at the beginning of the school year, they give us their consent, or it's on an individual call basis. But another thought would be is doing cohorts and testing them maybe once a week, twice a week, and actually doing a study to see if we do have any asymptomatic carriers in the district that go without being caught. Because if they're not symptomatic, they don't get tested. So that would be something that we would have to maybe look at and discuss further on this summer. But again, nothing would be done without parental permission.
Okay.
Okay?
I have a question for Dr. McKenna. So back to graduation. So it's outside at Listle Field, right?
Yes.
So what if the students' chairs are spaced out and all that? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
You mean spaced out?
So like, you know, a good, 6 feet, whatever it may be, and they're outside.
Yeah, great question.
Okay, as far as I understand, we've got, the students are to be 6 feet apart, okay? And every student is getting 4 tickets. So the way they're looking at it is putting groups of 4 together, okay? So while they're sitting, in theory, that would be sufficient. However, it's going to be close to possibly 800 people. That's a mass gathering. CDC DHS states that if it is not with other people who are vaccinated, and if it is not with one other family, they are strongly recommending we continue to mask, even because this is considered a mass gathering.
So where are all the spectators sitting then? Are people, I would imagine people would probably stand too, and, right?
They're going to have
There'll be 4
sets
guests.
of 4. Yeah, they're only going to be 4, but they're only going to be sat in groups of 4. But they're going to be sitting.
So
No other spectators are going to be able to come and watch. It's only the ones that have the tickets.
And the graduates are going to be in the bleachers.
I don't believe so. I think they're going to be in
Yeah, Jake, you had
We
talked
were
about
doing
this
the
in that.
bleachers, I
Yeah,
thought.
so the plan as of now, you know, that anything could change tomorrow, but the best plan that we have is now, we will have rows that are approximately 8 feet apart. So a chair, I figure 2 feet, there will be 6 feet of space and another 2 feet. Side to side, there will be 6 feet between all the students. Once we get into the back rows, after the students, where the 4 per student visitors can be there, then we will have 4 together, that 6 feet space, 4 together. So all the students will be 6 feet apart from anybody. There will be no grouping of them at all. The family of 4 or visitors of 4 will be grouped together. that's how the chairs will be set up.
Okay.
And Angel, you bring up a very good point. I mean, that is certainly within the consideration of the board. The CDC has pretty clear guidelines for that, and certainly you can decide to accept those or to forge your own route with that.
Now, wait a minute.
I think it's reasonable to follow the CDC guidelines.
Yeah.
So that's my recommendation as the medical advisor. So.
But do the CDC guidelines, do those guidelines talk about mass gatherings where you have everybody 6 feet apart, or are they?
Yes.
They say
Right now.
even in yes, when it's a very large group, they still recommend the wearing of masks because it's just a very large setting, and so the potential for the potential risk probably outweighs the benefit of that. I think that's their risk calculation with that. Smaller groups, vaccinated groups, the risk calculation changes. When it comes to coronavirus, we know it to be a virus that does preferentially spread in situations of large gatherings. That's the way it's often moved, and that's the way you see exponential spread, in cases. So I think that's probably why the CDC has made that recommendation, even in an outdoor setting, even with appropriate spacing. I think you can imagine as well, everything is, in a perfect world, that would probably be totally fine. But, people gather at an event, they walk into an event, they walk out of an event, they greet people. I think that's all very reasonable things to do, but it also probably increases the risk of contracting coronavirus if you don't have a mask on.
Okay.
Have we reached out to, like, the senior class or the parents on feedback from the graduates themselves in consideration of the recommendations?
Certainly, I think other board members can speak to there's been surveys, and I know that the seniors have extensively worked through this.
So specific to the mask though, because I have asked that question to senior parents and seniors, and I have not been told that there is any survey or communication specific to, seniors lost a lot this year, or starting in March of 2020, so I was just curious if their voice has been sought.
To that end, in a way, I guess I feel it a little bit like, have we sent out a survey asking people whether or not they should wear seatbelts? Seatbelts, it's just one of those things, we kind of expect people to wear them, and during a pandemic, I think it's...
Seatbelts are a state law, you can't compare that. That's apples to oranges.
Well, we didn't send out a survey because the CDC guidelines suggest masking at large gatherings. So if we ask people if they had a preference about wearing masks or not, that really wouldn't be appropriate because the medical guidelines suggest that we should wear masks.
And to be honest, we also haven't, because we're still under a board decision to wear them. So this is the first time tonight about graduation that we're asking, anybody to weigh in on it, and starting with board members, so.
Yes, and I appreciate that you reference we a lot, so I was just, when you say we, I didn't know, who does that include?
Absolutely.
The CDC provides guidelines, and other districts have mask optional, which has, based off this, just some info gathering.
Absolutely.
Has been a collective approach and opinions too, so that's why it was just kind of better understanding the component.
Thank you.
And Darlene, I just wanted clarification on one thing you said when we would be testing students. There's no thought that we would be testing all students like once a week or once every 2 weeks, or have we looked at anything? I know like some universities, if you have your vaccine, you don't have, they have everybody tested every week, but if you have your vaccine, you don't need to be tested.
We have not even considered at this point testing all students. And again, testing students are having them, we don't want to make it mandatory for them to tell us if they've been vaccinated. I will say if it comes down to needing to contact trace because there's been an exposure and they tell me they have been vaccinated, I will check on WER for that. to make sure that it has been documented, just for the safety of that child and everybody else in their family and the school. But we can't mandatory or mandate them to tell us. So at this point, the only plan was to just pick out 1 or 2 cohorts at the elementary level, possibly here, just to do it on twice a week, just to gather data, but definitely on the symptomatic student. We would not be doing it on close contacts. We won't be doing it on asymptomatic at all. So it would just mainly be the ones who are showing symptoms while in school.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Andy, can I ask Patrick a question? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Patrick, I was reading an article in the New York Times about how the CDC was able to recognize how the virus gets in the air, essentially. But then it also pointed out that there's not been one confirmed outdoor super spreading event. But, and we still sounded like, hey, you better wear masks in the classroom. It said events where they're shouting or singing, where you're projecting lots more. I mean, you're just essentially saying there's a difference in the risk between not being a super spreader event and not spreading at all, and we're going to lower that if we still wear masks with it. Or is it?
JD, it's a really good point. You know, that's not, I think that article is correct. And it is also a complex thing. I think you want to look at risk profiles in general. What risks are we willing to take? You know, difficulties of wearing a mask versus the potential, so the potential benefits of wearing it, the potential benefits of not wearing it in the context that we create. So indoors, obviously, coronavirus is spread through the air, droplets, and masks definitely help mitigate that. There's a number of corroborating studies to support that. Outdoors is a different environment. I think you're right. And there's actually a couple databases of where people track this. And by and large, spreading events are primarily, super spreading events primarily are indoor, or a mix of indoor-outdoor. So you can see some events where a wedding's partly indoor and outdoor, and you'll have a spreading event, and it's very likely because of the indoor contact. So it's a very reasonable point. The CDC, I think, is being cautious because generally I think they consider putting on a mask for a period of time as something that is generally doable. Not everyone can, but most people can. Certainly I wear masks multiple hours a day, and I don't, I'm going to be very happy when the time comes when we're not doing this, because I'm not a germaphobe. I like seeing people's smiles. I think, going through regular life, being able to see facial expressions is lovely. But at this time, I think to try to protect people and to try to do the right thing, I think CDC errs on the side of caution in this regard. And the CDC has not been perfect through the pandemic. It's a learning process. There's been a lot that we've learned about the coronavirus during this year.
I have another question. Have we looked at the data within Langlade County? So I know that, Elko lifted, they have mask optional. White Lake has been very open to providing parental choice in that, so they've had students unmasked since the start in the fall. Peace Lutheran, I know, also provides a lot of parent flexibility to make that decision. Have we looked at the data within Langlade County? So we talk CDC, it's big, it's far removed, but have we looked at our own data within the districts in Langlade County that don't have a strict mask mandate to see what their numbers and spreads are? Because I believe, I don't believe there's been any significant or continuous closures. I know White Lake had one when it hit Langlade County, but in terms of after that point, I'm just curious if we've looked at that data within our own county and our residents.
Well, that's a really good question. I would say that, in regard to Elko and White Lake, that they have an obligation to protect their most vulnerable students, and that they have frankly failed in that obligation by lifting the mask mandates for those communities. And the reason I say that is, let us say there's 1 or 2 people that do get infected because people aren't wearing a mask. That can spread to other people, and individuals that are vulnerable, could potentially get infected and have a serious outcome from that. So, I feel that, looking at that data would be very reasonable, and certainly maybe someone at the county has gathered that, because that would be a reasonable thing, and certainly we could certainly reach out to them and ask the county if they have collected any data. I don't know if the schools have either. It would certainly be a reasonable thing. I primarily, my role as the medical advisor I take very seriously, but primarily I work at Langlade Hospital and I see patients at the clinic there, so it's not my primary role to collect that data of other schools.
Yep, no, I just.
Patrick, Jill, I know I saw that list of schools that were held the mask mandate. There was like 20 or 30, whatever that was. But there's like 472 districts. I don't know how many schools there are in the state. I don't know, 1,000. So it's probably a small percentage. But more of the thing that's so scary is what's going on in India. I don't know if Dr. Patrick could address that. Like why it's so bad there, where dead bodies down the river and a disaster there. It's just like, that's something that's still trying to avoid something super scary like that, even though it's not so bad right around here, I don't know, for a slightly mild inconvenience of wearing a mask.
And then I would also like to add, currently, there's only 38% of Langlade County vaccinated. 38.2% have had at least 1 dose. So, we're not anywhere close to any type of herd immunity. We are expecting within the FDA had issued an EUA for the use of Pfizer for the age group of 12 to 15. We're waiting for CDC to meet tomorrow to actually give their approval. Once that is approved, then DHS needs to get together and figure out how they're going to distribute the vaccines throughout Wisconsin for those age groups. So potentially next week we can start vaccinating that age group. But again, at this point, we only have 38% of Langlade County vaccinated. There's only 44.4% of Wisconsin vaccinated. So, we are nowhere near herd immunity, which they're saying is 80% vaccinated. In looking at the other stats that I saw today for our Langlade County, or for Wisconsin, I should say, the higher age group that is getting infected is 14 to 17, and then 25 to 34, I believe, is the way it works. So still, it's the younger group of kids are the ones that are higher on the curve on the graphs that I've seen. So, those are just the stats from, it was dated on the 9th is when all of those statistics were placed on the DHS website. So.
Okay. No, we could have had that in public comment if you had a comment. We're going to move on because we've got a long meeting tonight, unless somebody on the board has more to say about the COVID update or more questions.
Andy, I do have, I'm not the sharpest tack in the box, but my question is, are we trying to mandate something that is not a law? And that's all I want to say. We can move on.
Okay, so you're not going to make me answer it?
No, I just want to
Good.
throw it out there for everybody to
Oh.
hear. Are we trying to mandate something in our district that is not a law?
It's not a law. We're doing this for the safety of the
But
children of the district.
We as a board are given the powers to make the decision to, whether or not it's a law, we are given the powers to make that decision through the Department of Education. That's our responsibility. So regardless of whether it or not it's law, we can institute these rules or whatever we call them.
So all activities inside and outside, everybody's supposed to be masked up, correct?
No. Right now,
Well, if you go by the DHS site and by the CDC, you don't need to wear a mask if you're outdoors where it is possible to maintain 6 feet of distance from others, or outdoor activities that are independent or only with members of your household, mask may not be needed. If it is not possible to maintain 6 feet of distance from others, or you plan to attend a gathering, even one where physical distancing is planned, a mask is recommended. This is from the Department of Health Services, Wisconsin, and I can read the same thing out from the CDC. So the CDC does not tell you what a small gathering or large gathering is. They don't say that if you get to 199, it's a small gathering and 200 is a large gathering. They use the same criteria. They say that if it is going to be more than one household that is meeting together outside, which obviously this is going to be where you have 150 households. The recommendation is to wear a mask even with social distancing because of the risk it poses. And I do understand that, you can talk about people being vaccinated or, it's my right, but don't we also owe something to the people in society who are more vulnerable? You're looking at someone who takes care of them. Okay, I took several nights of call last year. I was the one who had to call someone and say that their son or grandson or husband died. I had a close staff member that I took care of. The spouse died in my care. And how do you answer those people? Things happen, not everybody. If you look at it, it's 99.9% or 99.99% will recover. But that's still 0.01, 1 out of 1,000. Our rates here, I think, for Langland County, we are more than that because we had about 43 or 44 deaths for our 20,000 population. That's 1 in 500. If you look out there, that's 1 in every couple streets. That's not fair. That's not right to be looking at those families losing their loved ones. So if we can do something, as Patrick said, do I want to wear masks all day long? No, I don't. But you are doing it because even if you're vaccinated, what if you are spreading it? It's just like the influenza season. You try to take the vaccine and you use the precautions because you don't want to be the one spreading it to somebody. You may have a good immune system, but don't we owe it to the people around us to keep them safe?
okay, thank you. Anything else before we move on to COVID? From COVID. Okay, we'll go on to the next item, which is board member meeting legislative report. And I'll just start by saying that Kim and I went to the joint finance meeting in Rhinelander. I gave you a draft of what we talked about. We talked about revenue limit ceiling, special ed funding, sparsity aid, mental health issues, and there was a fifth thing there.
I think that's it.
Anyway, there was a good crowd there, and I guess people were listening to that. I also, this past week, Calvin Callahan was in the district, and I met with him briefly after his tour of West and the high school. And I will say that Mr. Rogers had 4 students give him a tour of the high school, and they did a really great job. Went over some of the same issues. I shared with him the report that John Humphreys had sent us and talked to him about that. And I also sent a letter to both Mary Falkowski and Calvin Callahan because some of the numbers that Tim and I used in our presentation somewhat appeared to be different than what is in John Humphreys' report, and we can share that, I can share that letter with the board, or we can send that out to the board, just the explanation of why those numbers are different. But I think, in general, you know, we really need to keep lobbying for what we need here in Antigo. And we're in sort of a good position because Calvin Callahan has been very good about coming to Antigo. You know, we met with some of the board members earlier. So, yeah. Yes. And I guess the only other thing I want to mention is that I asked Mary Kay to start keeping a file of any correspondence with the legislators, whether they respond. So if you have correspondence with legislators, written correspondence, I should say, and they respond back, just send it to Mary Kay so she can put it in the file. And so I should say, I don't know if I mentioned this before, that the first letter that I sent to Mary Falkowski, I did get a reply back from her aide, and it says, Mary completely agrees with you in the support of this proposal. This is talking about the revenue ceiling. Increasing the revenue ceiling is something that she will be advocating for in the budget. And then the second one was special ed funding, an increase in special ed funding, and it says Mary agrees that there should be an increase to special ed categorical. However, it is impossible to commit to this, to a specific percentage increase at this point in time in the budget before we know the full facts and figures of other portions of the K-12 budget. And in the listening session, Mary said that there was a different proposal than what the governor had made as far as varsity aid funding that would give all districts funding for if they spend beyond a certain point. Yeah. Tim, do you have anything you want to add, like that fifth point I didn't remember? Okay. Anybody else got anything on legislative? Okay. Then we can move on to item B. And we have invited John Humphreys, the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Association for Equity and Funding, to talk with us. So John, are you there?
I am here. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Yeah, so it's so nice to be with you, and thank you for the opportunity. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay, good. Well, you should all have a handout that I had created that we're calling our data dashboards. They talk about school funding and issues in school funding. Do you all have that?
We will in a minute.
Okay.
Yes, it's in the email.
It's in.
Sure.
It's in your package.
Okay.
I'll just tell you a little bit about AEF. It was formed in the late 1990s to advocate, as the name would imply, for fairness and equity in funding. The organization brought a state lawsuit against the state of Wisconsin for unfair funding practices. That was decided in 2001 by the state Supreme Court. That case was known as Vincent versus Boyd, and the decision basically required the state to take into account the burden and the challenge, financial challenge of educating kids with disabilities, kids from low-income homes, those who get free and reduced price lunch, and kids who are English learners. So you have state and federal mandates around two of those three groups, and yet the funding is really not adequate to meet those needs. And so those are the kinds of things that we advocate for at the state level, and we certainly appreciate the membership of Antigo. And so if you have the handouts, I can sort of walk you through that at this point.
Yes, I think we all have it open.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm going to talk about four things with you this evening. The first one is, where does your money come from? The second one is the revenue limits and how your funding is limited. The third one is spending and how much you spend. And the fourth piece of the puzzle is what the relative burden that you have from those three groups that were cited in the Vincent versus Boyd lawsuit. So you can see a pie chart on the front of the first page. 75% of your revenue in Antigo is limited under state law. And while AEF does not oppose revenue limits overall, what we have found is that it's unfair in our estimation to have different districts with vastly different revenue limits. You can see the chart at the bottom of the page. Starting in 1993, your revenue limit was set just below the state average, just about $100 per kid. But you can see that now you're about $600 per student below the state average. And I'll give you a little bit of context. In your area, I did similar sheets like this. For Boulder, their revenue limit is $12,200 over that, $12,200 per student. So that's, what is that, $1,400 per student above where you are. And Northland Pines is over $2,000 more per student than your revenue limit. So that gives you a sense of just some of the levels of unfairness that exist in our system. If your revenue limit was at the statewide average, I'm looking at the box below the line graph, if you were at the state average, you would have had about $1.3 million more to spend on students this year. And if you add that difference up over all the years since the revenue limits, you would have had $21 million more for educating students in Antigo School District. So again, we think that's fundamentally unfair, and it's just, although it makes sense to have revenue limits in general, to have such a wide variety of them and so much difference in the ability of school districts to raise funds to meet those needs is just patently unfair. So I'm going to pause at this point and just ask if anybody has any particular questions about either the pie charts showing that 75% of your revenues are limited under state law or that line graph.
So John, could you just explain a little more why we started out with a lower revenue limit than the state average? Why didn't we all just start out the same?
Yeah, well, isn't that fascinating? It was an effort under the Thompson administration, and very legitimate, certainly at the time. Prior to that time, school districts were funded mainly on whatever their local property taxes were, and there was a big push to have some of those property tax increases start to slow down, that people felt like property taxes were going up too rapidly. And so at a point in time in 1994, they said, we're going to take whatever you spent last year, 1993, and limit your revenues at that level. But I actually talked to Governor Thompson about this, and that was never intended to be a long-term limit. They were planning to do that for a few short years, get a handle on the situation. And you might, for those of you who've been around in education politics for long enough, that's when they started the three-legged stool soon after that, which was revenue limits, what was called the qualified economic offer, which was a way of limiting the rate of raises of teacher pay and all educator pay. And then the other piece was two-thirds funding. So that the QEO no longer exists, although now we have the limits with regard to Act 10, which serve much of the same purpose. And then we also have the two-thirds funding commitment, although we've fallen somewhat behind that. So it was an effort, to answer the question, it was an effort to limit the rate of property tax increases. They took a point in time, and some districts were higher. Antigo happens to be a district that was lower. The district where I was superintendent prior to doing this work for AEF was also lower. And interestingly, the district next door to us had a revenue limit $2,000 more per student. We had about 650 kids. So they got $1.2 million every year more than we did. And you can see it in the buildings, you can see it in the number of staff, you can see it in the quality of materials and the opportunities for kids. That's why it's just so fundamentally unfair.
Okay, thank you.
John, can you talk a little bit about the link between the revenue limit and student achievement? Like, is it well established? I know, like, Finland has highly equitable school funding, and they have very good kindergarten, high school scores, like on PISA, but I don't know how that works in Wisconsin. There's parts of we our budget to pay teachers.
Well, it's actually something that we're studying right now through AEF. We did one preliminary study that showed a significant correlation between spending and outcomes. And what we do know is that as you have more and more kids who live in poverty, kids who are homeless, kids with disabilities, and the federal mandates that come with those things, that soaks up a lot of money that's not money available for other programming. And so there is a correlation. Now, I would say this. I took very seriously, as we all do in school administration, the charge, the responsibility of educating every student to the highest level possible. And I think there are things that, we have to, as educators, take a tough look at the things we're doing and make sure that we're not spending money on things that are not having a significant impact. Luckily, we have a good amount of research about things like elementary reading and math, and the best way to teach those. I think one of the things we've struggled with in Wisconsin is achievement gaps and overall declining achievement, and luckily there are good things that we can do about those things. And some of that is just reallocating funds from things that we're doing that are not having that much of an impact. Some of it is also about these equity measures where other districts have opportunities for much more comprehensive training, professional development, program adoption, curriculum adoption, facilities, extracurricular programs. It goes on and on. So I hope that answers the question.
When you mentioned reading, Andy, you can tell me how this agenda is. Can you talk briefly about what you did with reading at source? Like, did you emphasize phonics and guaranteed viable curriculum that's built on itself?
Yeah, well,
Go ahead, John.
Sure.
I don't think we're going to go there because we had a lot on the agenda tonight, so we're going to stick to your report.
No worries. Yeah, there's a lot of information out there, and anybody who wants to get in touch with me offline, I'm happy to do that. It's the other, aside from this funding work that I do, that's the other passion I have. Any other funding-related questions?
Are you going to continue on to talk about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we covered the first page. We've got 75% of your revenues are limited under the revenue limits. They started in 1994 based on what you spent in 1993. They weren't intended to be a long-term fix, but here they are, almost 30 years later, and your district has suffered to the tune of around $21 million. So if we flip the page over, we're going to talk about spending. That state average of spending is just about $12,000 per student, $11,930. You're about $800 below that amount, or $700. So you have limited revenues, you're spending less than the state average, but then you have these really significant burdens. 61% of your students are from low-income families. That's a significant challenge because, well, it goes back to the question about academic achievement. If you're going to close achievement gaps, and the research would show you, and I think my experience as Superintendent Thorpe would show you, that you have to be much more systematic and provide a good deal of extra learning opportunities for kids who are not maybe getting that kind of support at home. So thinking about 6 out of 10 kids coming to you from low-income homes is a significant challenge. 17% of students with disabilities is also a really significant challenge, especially considering the fact that the state only reimburses about 28% of those costs, and the federal government is even lower. And so what you have to do is, the old proverbial rob Peter to pay Paul, you have to take money out of general education programs to make sure that you're meeting the needs of those almost 1 in 5 kids with disabilities in your district, which is, it sort of goes hand in hand with the low income. In some cases, income is correlated with disability for things like lead poisoning and low-cost housing. So you've got some significant burdens, and then you have 41 students who are learning English. So that's the level of ELL and English learners where you probably have to have 1 or more dedicated staff members who are working with those kids on a day-to-day basis. And that comes, not only with cost, but there are state and federal mandates around that as well. Providing high-needs kids with a quality education requires additional resources. We know that. It's time-intensive, it's costly, it's programming, it's staffing. And our state system mostly disregards the costs of educating those kids. We're one of only a few states that doesn't provide extra aid for students from low-income families. Now, some of you remember the program called SAGE. It's now called AGR, or Achievement Gap Reduction. That allows you to reduce class sizes in the early elementary grades. Great stuff, that's cool. We think it makes a difference, and yet, the only thing it does is address class sizes, and we know that kids from low-income homes have additional needs beyond simply having a class size that's a little bit smaller. Again, I mentioned the state aid for special education. There is federal funding for that, but I would say 17% of kids with disabilities is a substantial number, and all those kids with disabilities cost your district extra money to educate. Finally, there is no aid to provide English language instruction, or only a very small allocation, and so really looking at a very significant burden there. So one of the things AEF does is we take all of those pieces of information, the low-income, special education, and English learners, and we put those things together, and under our estimates, if you use just a 40% additional cost for those groups of kids, you identify additional funds that are needed by the district. And our estimates put that over $3,500 per student, or $8.3 million for your district, if you were going to be adequately funded for meeting those burdens. So our call to the legislature involved raising low revenue limits and closing the gaps. In the last biennial budget, the legislature raised the revenue limits by $300 in both of the 2 years. Unfortunately, they also raised the other revenues as much or more. So the gap, the spread in revenue limits, actually increased, and our variability got higher, which we felt was just very unfortunate. We wanted to sort of close those gaps, not have them expand. I think we were very glad to get the revenue limit up to the minimum that we got it to, and we call on the legislature to keep going with that, but to close those gaps overall. We also are calling for the special education reimbursement to go up. Right now, again, it's at 28%. We were hoping it would get to 30% last year, or the current year. We're asking it to go to 45 and then 55% of the actual costs. We're suggesting $150 per student for low-income kids, and then bilingual bicultural aid. So for the Anago example, it would have a floor of $10,000 and then $500 per student. So you'd be getting about $30,000 for those 40 kids who are English learners to help support the costs of teaching and supporting kids who are learning English, which again is a state and a federal mandate. So,
John, how does this argument swing? I like it, obviously, benefits of in a county like Waukesha, but also districts that have to send where they're taxed out and stuff on. It makes it a hard sell with their legislatures. That's why I haven't solved this problem yet. That's either, how do you convince them?
well, you know what's really interesting is that the districts that are facing these challenges are all over the state. And it's not only in wealthy suburban Milwaukee school districts that are higher spending and higher aid. They're scattered all over. Some districts you wouldn't expect are low revenue districts. And so what we tried to do, and really this is just sort of from a political perspective, just getting going, but we're trying to make legislators very aware of these situations. Senator Felskowski, for example, has your district as well as 4 or 5 others that are major players in her Senate district. Senator Bernier, Kathy Bernier, who I know well over in the Eau Claire area, is definitely a huge child advocate and an advocate for education and public education, but she has, oh my gosh, it's 10 or 12 school districts that are all very low revenue districts in her Senate district. Like Senator Felskowski, she's on joint finance. Senator Mark Line, who's on joint finance, is the co-chair, has quite a number of school districts in his southwestern Wisconsin Senate district. So what we're trying to do is make the senators aware of just the unfair burden of these revenue limits, and it's just the silliest thing. And people say, well, why would they let this go on for so long? And if there wasn't a greater purpose to it. And I think everybody sort of kicks the can down the road a little bit and says, well, they've been living with these low revenues for so long, they can keep doing it. But unfortunately, we've got to make it clear that this is just patently unfair.
Hey, John, I just had one other question on when it comes to inequity for special needs. In a voucher school, special needs students are, those voucher schools are funded at 100% up to $19,000 and something. And then at 90% after that for whatever it takes. How does the legislature justify doing that for voucher schools but not for public schools?
Yeah, that's a real challenge, Andy, and I think I don't know that there's any specific fairness logic behind it. I think that there was an effort to make sure that voucher schools were getting a piece of the pie that was going to help them keep going. I know the legislature has been very supportive of school choice and school vouchers, and I understand, why that happened originally. I think it just, and I'll tell you from my experience as a rural superintendent, that it can be a real challenge as vouchers expand when those pipelines of funds lead directly out of the public school and into the private school. Now, if we're not going to fight the voucher battle, because it's not likely that vouchers are going to go away. What I would say is it gets back to some of your questions earlier that I don't want to get into with regard to academic achievement, but we have to do as much as we possibly can to ensure that we're competitive in the public schools in our state report cards and in student achievement. And this is where the appeal to Senator Felskowski would be to say, okay, you gave us a competitive system with vouchers, now give us a level playing field, fund us fairly, fund vouchers. If you're going to fund them, do that on a level playing field with the public schools, and let us show you what we can do with a level playing field.
Okay. And does anybody else have any questions for John here? My final question for you, John, what would you recommend we do with this report to use it for?
Well, thanks for asking. If no one had asked, I was going to start talking anyway. So anyway, I appreciate it, and thanks again for your time this evening. I would really encourage you, honestly, I'd love to get a copy of this report card, this dashboard, so to speak, into every backpack. And let parents know that the funding system is just not fair to the kids in Antigo, Wisconsin. Each of you board members, I'd encourage you to reach out to Senator Felskowski's office. You're important stakeholders, and whether you're conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat, you're all child advocates. And let's talk about having a level playing field for all the kids across the state of Wisconsin and make sure that kids in Antigo are not getting the short end of the stick. We've got to have the funds in order to compete. And if they want us to have a competitive education marketplace, then give us the funds to do that in a fair way. So let's get them into backpacks, put it up on your webpage, put it out on Twitter. We did a whole news release last week about this, and I'd really encourage you to share it on social media, and for board members to talk with your local media and newspapers about it as well. It's really an important story to tell.
Okay. And I guess I'd follow that up by just saying, what do members of the board here feel about the idea of putting this in backpacks or giving it to the newspaper or having somebody address it on the radio? What's your feelings?
Well, I think it's important for everybody to know where it's coming, why we're set so low and why we're there. And
I think you need to write an article from the board, and as long as that is common knowledge, I think you should share it with the public, and if the newspaper is willing to publish that, people need to know, you hear about it all the time as a board member, as a member of the community, that, our children are not getting the education, our children don't have these resources, and now you know why. We have been shortchanged $20-some million for the past, that's like a couple lifetimes for the students, if you're looking at K through 12. So that was 2 generations of our kids that could have had better resources. I think the public needs to know, public needs to reach out to our elected officials. They are as much the elected officials that represent every single member of this county, not just the school-age kids and their parents or the board members. So if everybody joins voices and reaches out to the legislators, then we could probably facilitate that, and they are our representatives. We elected them to do what is best for the interests of our community or students. They owe it to us. So hopefully if you have strengthened voices, and you can get people to communicate with your legislators. Maybe you need to get whatever 1,000 signatures or 2,000 or 5,000 signatures and submit those letters to our legislators to go to bat for us.
That's a thought.
When all of this happened back in 93, 94, I was teaching then, and we were always kind of known as and the word frugal was used a lot. We were frugal, and the spending was very, they were very careful with their spending, and then the QEO came in, and all of this now is a result of that. Where we are now, our state funding was based on our spending, and we weren't spending. And I think there were a lot of people that thought it was great. Around here, they capped our salaries. We were frozen for 6 years. We didn't go anywhere. And there were a lot of people in the community that thought that that was okay. And I don't know the feeling now. I don't know how people feel about it. We were kind of pariahs, and everybody thought we made too much and we spent too much, and this was good for us to be held where we were. But now look where we are, and it's 30 years later. And I don't know that, the R word that nobody likes to say, I don't know if that would help or if that's even feasible. But we have to do something, and send it home. I don't know how many people are, going to take it seriously. I would hope they would.
Well, if I could just address that very briefly, because I was under the mistaken assumption that if the state, or when the state raises revenue limits, that the additional cost, the additional funding, comes from local property taxpayers. But I was set straight by the DPI budget director. So if the revenue limit goes up, that new funding, for the most part, comes directly from the state. There is a small portion that comes from local property taxpayers, but when they allow revenue limits to go up, that money comes from the state. So you don't have to worry about local property tax levies going way out. And the other thing I just want to point out is that AEF is not asking for all those high revenue districts to suddenly have their revenues cut. We're saying that if the legislature puts new dollars into the system, that those dollars start to close these gaps first before adding more money to those districts that have been at the top of the revenue stream for a long time. So we're trying to be very fair and very nice about it, frankly, that we recognize that the local property taxpayer doesn't want to have a huge spike in their property taxes, and totally understand that. And that, you know, folks that have been living with their school district getting a certain amount of revenues shouldn't have that suddenly chopped, you know, way down. So let's start to close those gaps in a reasonable way and address districts like Anago that have been, you know, they were frugal in the past. And kudos to those school boards 30 years ago. They were trying to do the right thing for the kids and balance that with taxpayers. And, you know, to hold people to that level of low spending for 30 years just is not fair.
Dr. Bardo, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I was the first-year superintendent when those were put into effect back in 93, 94. And Whitburn was maybe not as frugal as Anago, but we were pretty close. And then the previous superintendent didn't spend out the budget, and so our original budget was what we spent, and that's what it was for every district in the state. So if you were a high-spending district, you started above the average, and if you were a low-spending district like Anago and Whitburn, you were, for lack of a better word, it starts with S, that's what it was.
Yeah.
You were screwed right from the beginning.
Yep. And this is where we are now.
Exactly. And then, the other thing, Andy, you and I were at a meeting with Mary Filskowski,
Yes.
and if I remember correctly, what she said when you and I talked about it was important that Anago got more money, her comment was she was one senator and her Senate district is the biggest in the state, and then you look down at Milwaukee and in that same area there might be 12 senators. And so what she was saying was that she's only one vote, and it's the people in the South who have the votes. That's what I heard. So,
Yeah.
yes, I think it would be good if we sent this information out. At the same time, Mary will listen, but I don't know that she has the power down there to offset the other senators, which is what she basically said to you and I.
Yeah, but she's also on the Joint Finance Committee, so
True.
she has a bigger voice than most senators. And she is supportive of this, so the more that we encourage her,
And we should.
the more likely it is. And I'm just going to say what John has already said, that I think if each individual board member writes her a letter, and, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be about the revenue limit. And I'm going to look at you, Ms. Mack, because I know you deal a lot with mental health, and some of those kids are special ed kids. And you might want to tailor a letter from you that would say something about that. But for the rest of us, yes, we've all experienced the economically disadvantaged children. And for those who've been on the board for a while, I think Heidi did a report a few years ago comparing some of our schools that had low numbers of economically disadvantaged kids in with a higher number, and the effect on those that they were pulled up, whereas if you had a large number of economically disadvantaged kids, it was much harder to pull them up. So, do we have a consensus on the board here that we think this report ought to go in backpacks and go home to parents?
Can we also, when we say backpacks, so this is, are we going to include, can we do things like social media? You know, a lot of our families do a lot of social media over checking backpacks routinely, so can we utilize our social media presence that way also?
I don't see any reason we
Should
couldn't,
ban if the board agrees.
if the board is in agreement on that.
What about the paper? No kind of article in the paper. Or
Yes, we can contact Rachel and give her the
It would be
report.
nice if you wrote a letter explaining all this and then added the 2 pages that are there. It would be nice to have it on the front page so people understand.
If you do it on social media, can you get John's point in there that it would probably be most likely state revenue or not local property tax rate increase to get that money? Say that in there somewhere?
Yeah, it should.
Yeah.
Because I think to Mary's point about how this started, probably people supported this in 1993 because they were under the impression that their property taxes would go down or stay stagnant. And now that you look at what it has done to the education, people would probably see it for what it is and support the board and request to have the funding restored.
I think when we think about that $21 million that we haven't had, that we have made some cuts that we probably wouldn't have made if we...
Or are we pushing the board towards an operating referendum sometime the trend continues?
Yeah. And so, Tim, I have a question for you, and I don't know that you can answer this on the spot, that if that low revenue ceiling went up by about $500, say, do you have any idea of what that would increase our local taxes?
I think you could look at it as a third end, so, you know, we're, let's just say, Antigo is almost exactly 2/3 funded by the state on average. So, you know, how does that $500 relate? I'd have to do a little mathematics, I can get it to you by the end of the meeting.
Yeah.
Can I ask, since the last biennial budget, the revenue limits went up by $600, how much did your local property taxes change in the last few years?
Okay, but John, the one thing that you have not mentioned, and your data is a little bit skewed, is the declining enrollment exemption has really hit Antigo. And what we're going to look at is as we level off in our rate of decline, the exemption, because what you're showing is you're showing the revenue limit with exemptions, and I know I'm getting into a little bit too much granular, but the revenue limit right now is at $10,000 per student. And the reason our number is not 10,000 is because of the declining enrollment exemption. And look at that difference. That's a huge difference. So when you compare Antigo's, if we're level, if our enrollment's level, we're getting 10,000 per kid, not 10,800. And that's the cliff we're facing 2 years out. And that's why it's even more important that we kind of keep this dashboard up to date, because our gap, if you look at the graph, the reason it's going up was because we had declining enrollment exemption. Once that falls off, our gap is going to be $1,500 per child different.
Wow. Yeah, that's going to hit hard. Well, and to answer the previous question, in the last biennium, the revenue limits went up by $600.
Yeah.
Did your local property tax levy change in the last 2 years?
Last year it did, the year before, no.
Yeah.
It actually went down.
So that might give you an idea of what will happen if, I think the question was what would happen if the revenue limit went up by 500.
Yeah. I did the math on this, and certainly we should not accept my math over Tim's math or anything. But so that $500 increase would be a 14 cent a thousand. But that's just a very guesstimate. Okay. So we have some things here, a letter to go with this, perhaps, and I guess it must be you and I are working on that.
We'll generate a letter, right, and decide if we want each board member to sign it, how we want, and then we'll disperse through our media channels.
Andy, is there a way to include what Tim just explained with the decline in enrollment in that letter as well? Because I think we need to put all of those factors in there, like Tim just explained.
In 2 to 3 years, it will be a lot,
Yeah.
a lot more.
Maybe maybe Tim can help in that drafting of
Well,
that
and
note.
and maybe I'll have a conversation with John later in the week so that you
Yeah.
can verify what I'm talking
Okay.
about.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. I will just say that I think it's great to have more of us working on something like this. And I will also say that Joint Finance is working on the budget right now, and that's going to go on to the whole legislature soon. So this isn't something we want to put off for a month. We have to get it done and get going here. And we'll try to do that. Okay. So thank you, John.
You're very welcome. Thanks, everyone. You have a good evening. I appreciate it, and keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay. We're going to move on to item C, Wade Reamer regarding the Mattoon building. And go ahead, Wade.
Good if I stand right here? You can hear me okay?
Yeah, as long as you speak in a loud enough voice to address the board.
May I make a recommendation? I have watched a lot of meetings from our YouTube link, so the closer you can come towards the board, the easier it is for anybody viewing online to hear anybody from the audience. I don't know where that is specifically, but
I think it's right in the middle.
there you go.
Yeah.
It was a little quiet for me too, if you could get a little closer. I appreciate that, Joe.
Okay, guess we're going to have you right up here.
Well, I want these people to be able to hear too, if that's okay.
You're addressing the board.
I'm addressing the board.
So just speak loud enough so they can hear you, but we'd
Yeah.
like to have you here.
You'll hear me. I don't want to speak too loud because it'll take it out of composure, okay? The reason I'm here tonight is I'm Wade Reamer with Shepherd's Watch. We started a nonprofit, Christian nonprofit organization down in Mattoon. And we've been, in 2018, have been trying to get the Mattoon School to do some work for families in that community and just to utilize the building that was sitting empty at that time for 2 years.
I hate to interrupt you, but you're addressing the board.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. We were using that, trying to get that building since 2018. Okay? I'm here tonight, I know Mike Winter's here. I gave notification to my legal counsel that I'm coming to speak. They have no idea what I'm speaking about. I'm speaking from the heart tonight. Tonight's going to be from the heart. It's going to make some of you probably walk out of here tonight and say, I never heard nothing like that in a public school board meeting. Okay? The journey that we've been on with that school there started in 2016 for a lot of the community members there. Okay? That's water over the dam. The school's closed. That school closed in 2016. 5 years, almost 5 years later, we're still on that journey. Okay? A lot of taxpayer money's been spent on that building. A lot of revenue from the village of Mattoon, town of Hutchins, has been spent on that building. Fighting for a common cause. I sit here tonight, I think about educating kids. But what's truly important is educating kids. And a little bit was touched on here, the value of family, the nurturing part of nurturing a family. You want to see, and I'm sitting here, you want to see your numbers drop for troubled kids, and kids that are difficult learners. We have to start working with their families. We have to. If you look in the paper, the annual paper, what do you see in there when the court stuff comes out? What are we up against? And those of you that are Christians, I'm a Christian. I can say this is my First Amendment right here. Our Christian value should be our strongest value. If you say you're a Christian, your Christian value should be your strongest value. And it's not just in a church building. It's when we walk out of that church, is that we represent who we believe in. Okay? It's been a struggle. You guys don't see that building every day. That community stares that building down. 5 years it's there. To you, it's money, it's dollars. And I do know the change that came about through this whole transaction thing. And I'll admit there was a change. My original goal was to get into that building with a community center. But I made a commitment early on that I would do the Lord's work with this. I have to answer for that. And every one of you have to answer for that. Every one of us here in this community has to answer for that. We're accountable. Sure, it's dollars. And it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. But what you did show me through these last 2.5 years is how much we do need a Christian school down in that community. Now, will I say a Christian school would start ASAP? No, I'm not saying that. Am I open to discussing with you? And first of all, I wouldn't do it there if the board didn't want it done. But I would sure love to work together. I would sure love to have some of your kids get, and it wouldn't cost you nothing. You wouldn't own the building. We could bring some kids into that building, maybe some of the kids that are struggling from that community. There's volunteer teachers, retired teachers. There's one here with me tonight that we're willing to help some of these kids. Why ain't we using the resources that we have? I don't get it. It's not about money. It's not about money. It can't always be about money. If we truly look at it about money, we're going to fail. Sure, we all need money to live. We need money to run this public school system. That is correct. But when we divide a community like what's been divided here, we all have to answer for that. I'm going to answer for myself tonight in front of you and ask for forgiveness for the way I've been through this, because I never would have dreamed it would have been this route. But I don't answer to you guys. I answer to Him. I can see what's coming down the road. We can see the public school system is changing right in front of our eyes. Those of us that are Christians, and I don't mean to offend anybody else that has any other faith, but those of us that are Christians, we know what's coming down. Now either we're going to look it in the eye and we're going to stand up and attack it in the right way and try to make a change. We're a small town community here, Annie. We can all look around and we can't deny what's happening around us here. We can't deny what we see in the paper. We can't deny the drug stuff that's in this community and how it's affecting families. My offer to you guys tonight is let's get this thing rectified. I want this thing done, okay? Who's winning here? Is it about winning and losing? Or is it about doing what's right? This is important, not just to me. But this ain't about me. It never was about me, and I don't want it to ever be about me, because that's not what it's about. But it's pretty hard to do what's right and witness to people. The excitement in that community about starting out as a community center and someday being a school again is amazing. You guys don't see it. You guys don't feel it. You got your own thing going here. I raised an engineer, 2 doctors, 2 of my kids. I always told them it's not about money. And you can do anything you want, put your mind to it. We're better than this. I need your guys' support. We need to work together. We can make a change. But why are we not using the resources and the people that are willing to do it? If anybody can tell me why, I'm willing to listen. It can't be about money. The money will come. Part of the reason people are leaving the public school system now is because of the changes that are coming through the public system that is beyond your guys' control. Some of the stuff being taught is not what these kids are learning at Sunday school on Sunday morning. It causes confusion. We're accountable. Every one of us is accountable. And I would say all of us made mistakes in this process as we went through. None of us are perfect. But a true individual can say, you know what? I did make a mistake. I want to rectify it. I want to move ahead. I want to do what's right. We're here for a short time on this earth. Our impact is very, very important. We're going to impact people in one way, shape, or form. Either through our employment, either through family, and hopefully a little bit through our heart. Right now, we're at the point where the case is getting appealed. We can kick that can another 2 years down the road and spend a whole bunch more of the taxpayers' money on that building. Or we can sit down across the table and get this thing moving along. We're all accountable. And shame on all of us. Every one of us. We all believe we're fighting for what we think is the best thing. In the end of the day, our children are what we're fighting for. We're fighting for the same thing, and we're fighting against each other. Do you ever have a passion in your life that really grabbed you? That you chased and changed your life? I thank you guys for changing my life. Because you sure have.
Can I ask you a question or two?
Sure, go ahead.
Would you consider something like an annual-sponsored charter school, where we give you your own board and let you do it how you want, assuming you did something like agree not to make us pay transportation dollars, and I don't know, Andy, what else did you have to do?
Well, this is a question I was also going to ask you, Wade, is have you considered a charter school? But I think part of that question goes a little further, is have you surveyed your community to see if they would really prefer a Christian school or a charter school? And I'm not saying anything negative against Christian schools. I'm just saying that there may be people in the community that would prefer a charter school. And, you know, you say it's not about money, but do you envision that at some point your Christian school would become a voucher school? And then we really do turn it into money.
That would be a dream. That's my dream.
Yeah. So,
and that would be my dream because of the reason that I want to introduce children to Jesus.
yeah,
That's a passion, because that's the most important thing we have on this earth. Okay? I would love to sit down, and I think it would be another comment to sit down with you guys and let's have some of these discussions. We're not having them when they're going through the attorneys. You know my heart. Julie knows my heart. You guys know who I am. I mean, this is not the route that I want to go. I never had intentions of it.
So I guess I would say, you know, knowing that you're potentially would want a voucher school there, this is somewhat about money. We just talked about here about special ed and the amount of money the public school gets, the amount of money a voucher school gets. When the voucher school gets that $19,000, it comes right out of our budget, essentially. So, you know, I guess what I would say to you is, would you be willing to discuss the idea of a charter school? And I'm not saying, oh yeah, we got to have a charter school in Mattoon. I'm just saying this is one more thing to discuss.
Andy, can you have a Christian charter school, or is that illegal?
No, you can't have a Christian charter school. And I think you probably know that, correct, Wade? But you can teach Christianity outside of the school hours. You know, and I'm gonna say you can do it in that building, but I would rather elect somebody from the Wisconsin Resource for Charter Schools, answer those kind of questions.
Yeah, I'm willing, first of all, to answer your question, yes, I'd be willing to sit down. But I'll lose a part of what I want to do, which is a community center. I want to get a feel, I want to start as a community center. I want to get elderly people across the table from some young kids, hearing old stories. I want to use the gymnasium for family activities. It's a beautiful building. I mean, it's sitting there for 5 years staring us down, and it's tough to watch. So I don't know, I do, but I want to try my community center thing first, okay? And then push, so let's see what the community needs, and maybe at that time we can answer some of those questions. But what I'm really...
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? Amy, what is the reason that you prefer a charter school to a larger school? Just for Wade's benefit and for why it helps the Amico School District financially more than a charter? And can you still do a community center if it's a charter? Or is that something you need the charter school people to answer?
Yeah, so you would, you know, one of the big questions to answer is how many students would this school have if it was a Christian school, if it was a charter school, would it have those students no matter what? But how many there are there? And for example, if there's 25, I don't think we could do a charter school. That definitely would pencil out. If there's 100, you know, then maybe it starts to pencil out. If you're drawing kids back from kids who have gone to Wittenberg, I don't know if there's that many that have gone to Boulder. If you're drawing some of those back, that's a benefit to the district. But so, you know, in that discussion about charter schools, there's a whole lot of unanswered questions. And we might have that discussion and say, you know, sorry.
I don't know if you'll personally get the ones back that left. They went and they're happy where they went to. I mean, they went to districts right close. I don't think, I'm just being honest with you, I don't think you would get those back with a charter school. A Christian school, I think, would, in that area down there, would have great value. There's nothing in Boulder, there's nothing in Burnawood, there's Antigo, there's one in Shawano. But I don't think it would be that big. I think it would start out small and take its time. And I do realize it would hurt the pocketbooks of the public school system. But here again, we can use that excuse and we can answer to our Savior about choices that we make. Those of us that are Christians, I quit a high-paying job because of ethics and morals. I could not go on church on Sunday, per se, and go to work on Monday. Because when it's personal to you, when your relationship is personal, it makes a difference. And I only want to help you guys. I'm offering free help. Free help. I don't know what else we can do, but we got to get out of this legal mess. We're digging a hole.
So I'll just have one more question for you. In a timeline, if what would you envision a timeline to be to start your community center activities and then progress to a school if it was totally up to you?
It's going to be years. You know what I'm saying? And it's nothing's going to happen fast. There's nothing set up for it. I mean, there's nothing, literally, there's been rumors around at other places. I mean, there's nothing set up for it. We want to do what the community wants us to do. That's the first thing. And a Christian school would bring value there, but I can't say it's stone, but I'm not going to tell you different either. I'm not going to lie to you. And that's what part of me that got me into this position I'm in today, because I didn't lie to you. Okay? It changed because I saw the reaction. I got the feel of the community and the comments from the public, people being in Antigo and the surrounding area. Nobody understands it. You know what I'm saying? And it's bigger than this. I mean, I want to have, and it's going to bring tears to my eyes, and I hope you all will attend, a community Christmas program in that building where there's church and non-church kids with a Christmas program. Not a holiday festival, a Christmas program. What better way to introduce people? I mean, this is, we look in the world today, I mean, why are we not, I mean, I don't, if I wouldn't have came tonight and talked to you guys, I never could have got this off my heart. This, the Lord said, go, you have to go. They can no longer deny that they haven't heard. We have to do what's right. There's right and wrong. Andy goes better than this. This is a good school system. Community should be important to us. Water over the dam with Mattoon. There's very, very good people there. Mattoon's not a following community. They want to be a leader community for small. And I think we can, and I know we will. But we also would need your support. Equally. So, that's just what I wanted to mention. I'm open to conversation, but I think it brings value with get that thing put to rest and move in a different direction. There's so much hurting out there. I'll just leave you with this note. There's so much hurting people that different things, it can be health issues, different things that come up in lives and families. And there's not a better feeling when you can go down and sit down with somebody and listen to them. That facility alone will help us do that. We can use, I want to have a little coffee shop, and right off the bat, we're make a little coffee shop in there where community members can come and sit down and we can talk and do some stuff. I have a professional trailer and a half load, a big trailer load of professional exercise equipment that was donated by a YMCA that we want to utilize. All this stuff's been in storage. Just want to start to use it. I want to have fun. I want to start to use it.
And you know, Wade, when you first brought this to the board and there was a list of 13 or 15 things, every single one of those things was, I thought, what a great opportunity for that community. And then things kind of snowballed from there. But what you're talking about, I think every one of us sitting here, as far as a community center and getting, and you know, a homework place where kids can go in and, you know, get help with their, if Laurel's there to help them with their homework, or all of those things are good things. But then when it came to, you know, talking about the school part of it, that was the part that kind of messed things up. I mean, got things all kittywampus, so.
It was the hang-up, but I'm not there again. I'm not going to lie to you. That's not what I'm here for. It changed. The calling, I didn't want to lie to you because I knew you didn't want a school there. Okay? I think at this point where we're at right now, what I would like to see, a best case scenario for me is, let's not do a deed restriction. Let's do something where if a school would happen, it has to get approved by this board. Have Mr. Winter write something up where the board has to approve it. If you're worried, let's not do a deed restriction on a building that was gave to Anigo, that was partially built by the village of Mattoon. That doesn't make any sense. And that's what really hurts the community down there. Those types of feelings. Let's get over some of this stuff. I honestly believe, and I'll tell you this from the bottom of my heart, that if you give us a chance with what we want to do, you'll take a deep breath and say, man, I wish there were more of that. Let us start out, I want to start out with our community center, our coffee shop. I don't know where this is going to go. I see Christian schools coming more and more. One thing this COVID did was open up the eyes of a lot of people. Family got time to spend at home together with family. It opens up a lot of people's eyes. Nothing that you guys are doing individually wrong. But I have to be honest again, the public school system is changing across the nation. It is. It's a place of employment for a lot of you guys. And I understand we have to make a living. But when making our living doesn't follow what our heart says, we need to relook.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I'm just going to close here, Wade, because I think we we've heard what you said, and I think we understand what you're saying. I will say that when you say it's not about money, it is in fact about money. It's taking money from the public school district, which is struggling, and putting it over here in a voucher school. And that's just the way it is. I think it's up to the state legislature to make those two more equitable. If they want to have private schools and public schools, well, they should do it in a more equitable fashion, just as John Humphreys talked about. But that doesn't mean we can't talk about things. And so it'll be up to the board here where we want to go with the next step. And I'm just going to ask, so CISA 9 is the headquarters for the Wisconsin Resource Center for Charter Schools. Certainly somebody would be willing to come here and talk to us about charter schools. They have this grant program that you can get a grant to do some legwork to see if a charter school works for you. But to be honest, you know, when Wade says, I don't think those families will come back, I think it would be hard to do a charter school unless we have some numbers there, I think. But still, they would either come in person or they would do just like John Humphreys did here tonight. The person who does this told me he could talk for 2 weeks on charter schools, and he really could. So we would want to plan on having him talk for a little while, because there's a lot of information there. And you know, like JD said, if Anago authorized a charter school, it doesn't have to be Anago that authorized a charter school. It could be an authorization from a third party. But these are all things, if the board wants to hear about that kind of stuff, we'll get somebody in here at a future meeting. So is there consensus? Do we want to hear about that? And then I think, you know, maybe it's going to be more obvious about which way would be better for the Anago School District. I'm just going to say that way because that's what I represent.
Yeah, I understand that, but in the interim, the building sits empty. We should be doing our community center while we're discussing things like that, pushing towards a charter school. Because there again, we're on the same page. If we don't know if that would even happen or if we would really even want it. Okay, does that make any sense? Yeah, because our community center might be going so good and helping you guys. The building sitting empty right now, that is the issue today. The building is sitting empty. We want to utilize the building at some point. I wanted to use it. We were doing a food pantry, serving 50 families down there. We had to give up the building we were in down in Mattoon, and I asked to use the gymnasium for a food pantry during COVID and got turned down. That puzzled me. Even if I understand liability and insurance and stuff, but I also understand how things can be overcome. It's things like that. We still would like to have our food pantry going. I do it out of my garage now.
And sorry, I cut you off when I was trying to do my fertilizer in my tractor. Me personally, I'd like to start the community center and lease you the building for $1, but you pay the heat and sewage and stuff during the rest of the lawsuit until we decide who wants the school. If we let you open the community center now, and you agree not to open a school until the end of the lawsuit or something.
As long as you don't get in trouble for painting the outside of the building.
Okay, I think we're going to call it here, and I appreciate your comments, Wade.
Can I ask one clarifying question? Very sorry. So the last point you just made is what I want to just make sure I'm hearing and understanding correctly. So the number one goal for you would be the city center, with the school being the dream, so to speak, but maybe not come to fruition depending on, you know, how everything pans out, but your priority is the community center. Okay, so thank you. I just wanted to make sure.
I would tell you that I would be deceiving you. I don't want to deceive you.
Correct, and that's why I wanted to make sure I was understanding that correctly too, to see where the priority is. You know, the number one priority, number to priority your hopes and dreams further, so thank you.
Yeah, it's just time, but thank you for your time. I truly do appreciate all you guys.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on to item D, 2021-2022 budget planning update.
Let me know when folks have the document.
Can we stop for just 1 second? I know I've seen a couple people get up and move, and I can sure use a. Yeah.
Okay.
4 minutes.
Okay, hold it.
Starting to flow.
Well, here's a 5-minute break, 5-minute break, but let's make it 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Andy, if you have to take off 4-9, I have no problem taking over. Don't worry about it. Oh, yeah, check it out. Yeah. Probably got a while.
Julie, do we, I know this is more of an Andy question, but I just, when we do agenda items, would there be a potential to put high school report outs like junior optimist at 8? Or B, as opposed to having the high school student here all night?
Good point. So what is the heading? It's under new. So because it is new business, Jill, they have to go in that portion of the agenda, but they could have bumped up.
We can, at the beginning, plan our vendor meeting opening, that we can request to move stuff around.
Yes, the agenda can be amended. Or the order of the agenda can only be amended before the meeting officially starts. Or after it officially starts, before we get into the.
Yeah. I knew there was.
But Mary Kay and I really have to do a better job of just what you suggested, because I missed that. I should have.
Well, I mean, no, it's okay.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
but I mean, that would have prevented it, so, because it is already.
I mean, it's a restaurant.
Yeah.
What time did our 5 minutes start? I'm very good. I like it. Let's go with
'Cause I see your point.
You know, I never wear these masks, but I've always got masks in the car.
Yeah.
This one is
Oh, they hurt you so bad.
the ones I make, I make them kind of loopy.
Yeah.
And then if they're too big, I can put a little knot in it.
Yeah.
This one is driving me crazy.
It's probably gonna get picked up on the mic.
Oh my gosh, I was trying so hard. I know. I'm glad. I hate to always complain, but, you know, if they leak, that's why I took focus.
Yeah.
And you can look here and you can look in the other one.
Oh my gosh, I do it so bad. It was terrible. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. She's a 4%. Yes.
So it'll be, it'll be interesting. Board secretary elected. Very good. I hope they get the board secretary elected today.
That could go into a lot of different
I was here Saturday. But I've been I don't know, I think Roger's been here, probably Dave's been coming up for 10 days.
Oh, you know, you don't want don't worry. I told him so much. My social security is in my dresser. And I see, there's my note. And then I did it. When he was talking about that, I was like,
Yeah, I have it.
Okay, Dr. Bardo?
It was easier
So as we get going, I think we're probably past our 5 minutes.
Yes, I didn't bring my wallet in the office. Disappears again. It just
Am I missing him? Is he here?
He was heading toward the bathroom when he was talking to someone one-on-one. So I don't know.
Okay. Okay, we're going to continue on. And we were with Tim on the, I gotta look back where we were. On the budget planning update, and yeah, just one thing, what I said in the, Tim and I were at the legislative thing, the fifth thing that we talked about was increasing the funding for low, students from economically disadvantaged schools. Gotta get that out of my mind. Okay, so now, on with Tim.
Okay, so this is a budget planning document that I'm going to continually bring to you, and we're eventually, I'm going to ask you to kind of vote on the assumptions of our budget planning model. So as we go into, particularly with the hearing in August, that you've agreed on the assumptions that I'm making for both the revenue side and the expense side. So the items in yellow are things that have changed since the last meeting. And by taking action to pay down debt, we're also taking and freeing up interest. And that interest payment is reflected in the $19,000 that that we're reducing what we need to pay next year. So when I go down the lines, the one thing I noticed today, I've been spending the last week has been working on primarily looking at all of our federal funding that we're going to get through ESSER, and that's later in the agreement. And I started looking at this document today, and I apologize. We had there's an FTE increase in the additional expenditures that is an incorrect number. So when you look at that, it says, if we go down to the additional expenditures and we're saying FTE increase, we had talked earlier in the spring about adding a partial FTE for a 4K coach and a FTE assumption for adding STEAM. And we're going to shift that money over to ESSER, so that $91,000 should come out of there. And so then we look at the reduction side of the equation and the budget deficit surplus side, we need to subtract that $91,000 out there. So I'll update this, and I might even attach it in weekly review so you can see the number. but we're looking at a difference now of about 81,000. And, given the stimulus impact, and given where we are with the budget at this point, my idea would be, one way to balance the budget for next year is to look at how we're going to finish the year this year. Take the remodeling portion of the budget and run that through Fund 46. And then we don't, it's almost ludicrous to think that we're going to make budget reductions given the fact that some of the stimulus money that we're going to talk about later in the meeting. So I think it's good that we reviewed this document. I don't think at this point it certainly doesn't give me a whole lot of heartburn. And I think we're very close in getting to a point where I can present in June and August a relatively balanced budget.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. Thank you, Tim. And then we'll go on to item E, continuous improvement plan as it relates to federal grant money.
Okay. So what you'll see here, the first attachment you approved earlier this school year. These are our 3 district continuous improvement goals. And what we wanted to do tonight was show you how the federal grant dollars we are getting can positively impact these goals. So if you look then at the second attachment, I have to get back here, the ESSER budget. So this was the first one that came our way, and you'll see that we have spent it. In large part, it was at the start of the pandemic getting us off the ground this school year. You'll see a lot of I have to read here. The supplies for cleaning and the medical supplies, etc. Then you look at the second attachment, and it is the gear budget, which we also spent, getting us to this point in the school year. So the one of most interest tonight, which I'll have my colleagues speak on then, would be the third attachment after the goals, and that would be the ESSER 2 budget, specifically now as it relates to the goals. So with that, I'll turn it over to Amy.
Hi everyone, good evening. So as you can see on the third attachment of the budgeting, the budgeting information at the first continuous improvement plan, you can see that we've categorized them and how we're helping to support our academic foundation for all students. So you can see we're heavy in this area on staffing. We have a lot of the physical resources, but now we'd really like to support our students in an equitable way, helping them come back from remote learning, or to continue to support the academic progress that we hope to make continuing into next year as we work through hopefully some of the regaining our traction without a pandemic underneath our foot. So you can see how a lot of them, on the first 3 there, talking about supplemental after-school programming, and then also some transportation that's required if we want to engage more students in the after-school programming. Then next we have some supports for addressing long-term school closure. A lot of these areas are current deficiencies that we don't have in our system, and we've talked through a lot of these positions that you've already approved. So just showing you how that connects to the budgets and our long-term planning. And then also the technology piece. We know we have some ongoing educational technology upgrades and updates that we'll need to make to our Chromebooks and our systems to make sure that we continue to maintain that Canvas programming as we continue to use that as part of our educational resources as we move forward for our students and teachers. Okay, do you want to address mental health?
So a few things that we wanted to do within the mental health services and supports to support those goals as well. We should have 3 school psychologists in our district, just in general, based on our school population, and we have 1. We have hired a second one, but we are asking for, or our plan is to provide a 3rd one, and if not a school psychologist, we just reposted as a a mental health pupil services professional to try to capture a more wide swath of potentially a social work counselor or a school psychologist, just because it's hard to find resources up here. And so we already have 3 applicants for that. So that is one way to help support our systems work, and also to make up for the fact that our students are coming back from the pandemic and our teachers and supporting all of the work that we're doing. And then the mental health, we have that in there as general for supplies and for curriculum and stuff, but and for trauma-sensitive schools. However, we've applied for, we just turned in a mental health grant through the state of Wisconsin, hopefully for about $150,000 over 2 years, to provide supports as well in trauma-sensitive and creating a mental health pathway for students and staff in our community, and to build our social emotional learning. And so it's just more important due to COVID, but things that we needed to address anyway in the district. And if that's the case, if we get the grant, then these might be able to be reallocated somewhere else for something else that we need, but we put that in there just in case. And then Robin's Nest, I think it just supports our community and our students, and that is the other reason that was put back in. It was taken out this year because of COVID, but another access point.
Then on the nuts and bolts side of it, you can see we've got the allocation there that we were awarded back in December. So it's $2.1 million. And the performance period is a 2-year period. So we essentially have 2 school years and then make our final claim by September of 2023.
One area that I didn't address that I would like to just be a little more clear about, the curriculum adoption. So early you had heard both Mary and John Humphreys reference things about how we had kind of been frugal in some areas and not addressed some resources that needed improvement. So here, as we planned, we talked about how we really have an opportunity to replace some of our materials system-wide that we haven't been able to for a long time, more specifically in the areas of science and social studies. So we're going to be working through a process of the 6-12 teachers looking at that first next year, and then the elementary teachers have a lot on their plates already with math coming up next year and some residual ELA learning still. So they would then the following year look through science and social studies, so we could have an updated K-12 science and social studies resources for in the classroom. Those standards have been updated a few times since we had our first resources that we still have with some covers falling off and some shabby looking things. So we'd like to provide that using some of these funds. So that's what the curriculum adoption refers to.
Any questions? Our intention tonight was just to show you, as nice as it is to have these federal dollars come in, we have to be very thoughtful and make sure that we apply them where we have the greatest need. And we're always looking at, if it is for personnel, then how do we sustain that position once the grant dollars are gone? So it's revisiting and revisiting because we want to do the best job we can while that money's available to us.
Heidi, what's the student school psychologist ratio if our district should have 3? What does that break down to?
So bare minimum, we should have 2 based on 1,000, but 1,000 per, but that's just doing testing for special ed, and that's not what NASP, the National Association for School Psychologists, would recommend. They would recommend if you're really going to do systems work, it's anywhere from 400 to 600 students per psych.
Okay. And what about, what's the ratio for student to school social worker?
School social workers, we should have at least 2, but that's never going to happen. And we had Merrill, I think, posted for 5 school social workers, and Wausau posted for another 6. We are resource poor. I would say probably, I don't know that specific one, but it's probably around the same, and for the same reasons.
I thought I had read like 1 to 250 or something like that.
That's a school counselor.
I don't know.
I think it depends on what you're asking any one of those to do as well. A school counselor is anywhere from 200 to 300 students per, and we're about where we should be for school counselors. But we also are paying for some of our school counselors out of fund. They're not out of all of them out of general funds. We've been very creative in how we are, because of the fact that we're a low spending district, we've had to be very creative in how we spend our dollars to keep the people that we have, so.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, any more questions on this before we move on? Okay, then we'll go on to item F, Junior Optimist Club presentation.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brenda Moore, and I'm here as a member of the Junior Optimist Club. I've been on Junior Optimist for about 3 years now. Junior Optimist has been a pilot club for 3 years, and we would like to make it an official club at the high school. In year 1, we had 45 students. In year 2, we had 41 students. In year 3, we had 26 students, and we think that number is so low just because of COVID. In a typical year, 2 students go to attend luncheons weekly with the community club, and the adult community club pays for our lunches. Some activities that we've done in the last 3 years, we made blankets for the Humane Society. In 2 different years, we helped out packing backpacks through Web. We made baby blankets for the hospital. We made essential worker baskets for Elko and Burnwood clinics, and then sanitation departments, and then food service workers. This year we donated to the National Honor Society pickleball tournament for sanitation supplies. This year we started something new called Toilet Talks, which are flyers that hang in the bathrooms with different upcoming events. And then we attend the annual fishery with the Special Olympics students, and that's through the adult organization. We have volunteered during the NC Fest, the fair, Cheese Fair fundraisers, Pie in the Park, and these are all done with the adult organization. Basically, our members and students pick a project, they bring it to the club, and then we work together to make it happen. We don't have officers, but we do have a financial committee, which is a group of 4 students who just work together to okay our spending. Our goal as a club is to develop leaders in all students, so students take turns leading projects and different meetings. As a senior, I'd really like to see Junior Optimists continue and grow. Thank you, and does anyone have any questions?
Bryn, is there I know you said you didn't have any officers. Do you have is there an adult, a teacher,
Yes.
or somebody who's like a supervisor?
Yes.
Okay.
Michelle Arlen and then Anita Maddock works with us.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But Michelle Arlen is our main advisor.
Okay.
Do you guys have a favorite event that you do throughout the year?
The fishery is huge.
Yeah.
We have a lot of members who like to do that. But other than that, the cheese curds at the fair probably.
Yeah. It's mine too, Bryn.
I would share, I've directly or indirectly worked with kids that are involved in Junior Optimists, and it's actually really cool because they're hands-on with community organizations. So I think there's a lot of community involvement and engagement, interaction, and I think my feedback, what I've observed, is a lot of positive experiences for teens that wouldn't otherwise necessarily be available. I guess I'm not sure in other capacities, where you get that interaction with businesses and leadership and working together, and I like the switching of leadership roles to meet, I don't remember what you called it, goals, plans. So I just wanted to share that feedback because until I saw Junior Optimist on the agenda, I haven't heard about it much recently, probably because of COVID, so thank you for sharing.
So what we would do is bring this back and at our regular board meeting and have you vote then to make it an official club.
Okay.
And that fits into the policy we have about creating clubs?
Yes, kudos. You followed the pilot club protocol perfectly, the 3 years, and gave us the feedback on membership, etc. So all of that is in place, and now it would just require the board vote.
Okay.
And in terms of funding for that, unfortunately, Educators Rising didn't have members to continue that club. And so we would just, it would be a net zero. We take that funding and provide the advisor for the junior optimist, the site.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go on to possible action items, and item A is the election of the board secretary. And we should have did this at the reorganizational meeting, but it was missed, and thank you to Danny for noticing that.
Then I nominate Mary Kay Pregler as board secretary to the Unified School District of Antigo Board of Education.
Second.
Any discussion or comments?
Move to close nominations and accept by acclamation.
Okay, second for that?
Yeah, second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll go on to item B, consideration to approve position analysis for the school forest coordinator.
I move the board approve the position analysis for school forest coordinator as presented.
Okay, Mike, do you have something to say on this?
If you're going to say right away, go for it.
Oh, okay. Do we have a second?
No, we haven't, but I will.
Okay.
No, Mike may.
Okay. Well, yeah, I was asked to present a little bit to you. So, first of all, I'm here to represent the School Forest Committee. I have a few other members of our committee here. Chris Tarpey sitting there as a community member on our committee. Avery Colbins is another teacher on our committee, and Tim is on our committee as well. And there are others too, but those are the ones that are here tonight. And so I'm here to represent them and ask you for your support in hiring a school forest coordinator. You have shown tremendous support so far over the past few years, especially with the construction of our new center. I really want to thank you for that. Even before that time, I always felt great support from the school board for anything that we came to you with as far as school forest related. So I really want to thank you for that. But we're at the point now where we've had tremendous community support. We've raised over $600,000 from community donations to build the structure that we have, and we received some funding from the school as well. And so we're at the point now where we need to utilize that facility to our maximum amount. And our committee really feels that it's important that we have a person in place to coordinate the activities at the school forest. And so I'm not going to read through the whole position analysis, but you have it, I believe. Hopefully you had a chance to look at it. We feel that a school forest coordinator is going to provide us with the best bang for our buck in terms of utilizing the facility and doing the best for our students as far as educationally. By having a coordinator, we have a much more uniform program. We have somebody who can dedicate their time to developing curriculum and leading activities and lessons at the school forest and helping the teachers back in the classrooms prepare lessons for pre-visit and post-visit activities, so it kind of all ties together. We know the research on outdoor, environmental, experiential education is tremendous as far as academic achievement. Students that often struggle in the classroom they just shine when they get outdoors, they get into a different environment. I've seen it personally. I think Mary has seen it. I've been up there several times with Mary when she was a teacher. It really is a neat thing that we're just not providing our students right now. We're a little bit behind as far as other school districts in the area. Many of them are well on their way. We're kind of just getting started. And so we as a committee really feel that a coordinator is the route to go. Not only is there going to be academic success there, but just the logistics of the school forest, the scheduling, the busing, taking those types of things off of a teacher's plate really can make the program be a lot more successful down the road. And then we also know that there's a lot of community interest in our new facility. That's one of the biggest questions I get when people see it, like, is it open to the community? And I'm like, well, we would like it to be. That was part of our plan, is to have a community building, not only just for the school. But those types of things require somebody to kind of be in charge. And a facilitator, coordinator will have that task of kind of scheduling the building and making sure that it's, all the nuts and bolts are in place when somebody wants to use the facility as well. So that's kind of the reasoning behind our thoughts there. I can entertain any questions you might have.
Okay, was there any questions? Yeah.
I'm excited about this one, sorry. Didn't mean to jump the gun.
Okay, I guess we will go ahead with a roll call. Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Halsey?
Yes.
Lidle?
Yes.
Deep?
Yes.
Maddox Nelson?
Yes.
Newfeld?
Yes.
Hyatt?
Yes.
Schrader?
Yes.
Zimmerman?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes. Okay, and then we'll go into item C, consideration to approve masks as an option, as optional at graduation for all attending.
Move that the board approve masks as optional at graduation for all attending the ceremony.
I would second that.
Okay, any discussion or questions? Kind of
I
covered.
think for the reasons that have been cited by the medical advisor and what we have heard, basically this is, in my opinion, a school-sponsored event still. And I think we need to follow the guidelines, and I strongly urge that we not approve this and vote it down.
I just have a question, and maybe you can answer this now that Dr. McKenna is gone.
I'll try.
What if there was a little compromise here and we required masks for everybody entering and exiting, but they could remove their mask while they're sitting in their socially distanced chairs?
It would be hard, even the seating and everything, they're not going to be able to enforce them unless you truly have somebody monitoring, and you don't want to create a scene in that situation. I'd hate to open up this can of worms and then try to deal with it afterwards. If this should turn out to be an event where things spread, you don't want it to be on us that we did not do our due diligence. I'm very sure, if you go back a year when this all started, people were upset about the masking and everything, but our district has been quite successful over the past year. We have kept our schools open. Our students have been safe, our staff have been safe until we could get the vaccinations. What we have achieved over the past year, let us not throw away at the end now. We have done a great job over the past year, and I strongly urge that let's finish it strong on this year. And hopefully when the fall semester starts, we'll see how things go. By then we still have 4 or 5 months, so maybe we'll never have to address this issue again in the future. The vaccines work and herd immunity works and the pandemic dies down. We are safe, and I'd like to keep our communities safe. Don't overwhelm our healthcare resources.
Okay. One more question that I've had some parents call me and say, you realize that everybody's going from graduation to graduation parties where there's going to be no, probably no masks and lots of circulation, and I guess their comment was, how would we even know that it's spread at the graduation or the graduation party?
I think that, go ahead.
It's still, would my conscience be clear in that situation? Yes, that it did not happen on my watch. I was not part of this that voted to let people come there and give them the chance to spread or to affect somebody that ends up with a bad outcome.
Okay.
People have the right to choose what they want to do. If it is smaller get-togethers, if you read the guidelines, they say that if it's an outdoor thing with your own family or other one or two families that you always are together with, that is okay. But then when you talk about a bigger gathering,
they're still recommending that you keep the mask requirements. And again, as I said, if you were to walk down there will be people who may not follow this. We don't want to tell them up ahead that, we don't require you to wear a mask. It's up to you. Then you open it up as a free-for-all. So I'd sooner not get into that situation.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on this motion?
I respect what the district has done. I think the district staff has gone through a lot.
Done a tremendous job.
Yep, and that's to not be minimized in any fashion. And I think feedback from people in the community and my own questions when I think about a vote on this is, I also somewhat struggle with all due respect, have we looked at the data within our own counties? So Boys and Girls Club was unmasked until the mask mandate, 0 shutdowns. White Lake School District, have we looked at their numbers? Shutdowns when it went through the community. Again, Peace Lutheran Schools, I don't know that we're being objective in our data. And again, all due respect, zero disrespect intended by this. I struggle because I feel like our seniors were cut short in March of 2020. They've had zero normalcy. They have had zero voice or say. They've just been expected to do and follow and comply, and they have. We have an outdoor graduation ceremony with a rain backup plan of a drive-through. So we're just hoping and praying that we have the outdoor ceremony for these kids. We haven't provided them, everything has been restricted. Parents, siblings, family couldn't be in person to cheer kids on at extracurriculars. They've literally done this graciously through the entire year plus fourth quarter of last year that I feel on behalf of the senior class and their families that this is what we can provide them, with the understanding that we also can't minimize that people can make well-informed decisions if masks are optional of what works best for them. I just struggle because the data within Langley County just doesn't seem to back what we're asking for. So for those reasons, that's my feedback. In addition, I'm also curious on how we would handle anybody that has a mask exemption, a parent or a relative that plans to attend, and how we would address that.
Can you answer that, Julie?
I can. So if you noticed this evening, we had people in attendance without masks, and I personally didn't get up and address that. The meeting was starting by the time I noticed. I checked with Tom Schofield again today. Now that all spring athletics are outdoors, some wear masks, some don't. And he also has ceased, approaching spectators because they are outdoors. Indoors, we were more diligent during the other seasons. So, and like Dr. Deep was saying at graduation, I don't think any of us intend to stop somebody on that occasion and force the issue. But I professionally and personally agree that it should be one way or the other, so that we can clearly communicate expectations for people. We haven't been able to determine that any cases were spread in the school, but I take great pride in that and believe that it's because all of our mitigation strategies are in place. And I feel I share your frustration about the kids, and want to provide something memorable for them, but I also think that we're so close to that finish line, and the kids have been tremendous, and so has the staff, that it does seem a small a minor inconvenience to err on the side of safety. So those are mine.
Okay.
One quick question. So, did anybody get COVID at prom or after prom? Because, the kids weren't wearing their masks all the time. They're together with large groups. They were indoors as opposed to being outdoors.
Not that I am aware of.
Okay.
And you wouldn't necessarily know if somebody had gotten COVID if they're asymptomatic. And for me, that's my concern, is that they're asymptomatic, they get COVID, they take that home to grandpa.
Yeah, that is what I worry about, and we have seen a slight uptick in the number of people presenting to walk in the emergency room, etc. So, and again, you are seeing a slight number of positive cases among the younger folks. It could be that the older ones are vaccinated at this time, and that's why you're seeing the younger ones. But again, as Patrick said, we don't do studies. I don't think you have the resources with the healthcare department to even consider doing a study like that. It takes a lot of resource to gather the information with regards to each school district that doesn't have the mask requirement and or what time period, what their rates were. That would be something that would have to, you could approach the health department and ask them if they would consider getting you that information if they have the resources.
And I appreciate that feedback, and that's why I looked at the health
All I can
department's
tell you is the number
numbers.
of positive cases that we see, and I can't disclose that either for what reasons you know, but yeah, we do see at least as of this morning, I saw a lot more number of people presented with symptoms that were suspicious. It just gets you worried because sometimes it takes that 8 to 10 days where you might have somebody who goes home is positive and you pass it on to somebody else, and they can take anywhere from 3 to 10 days to start showing those symptoms. You are in that window right now. If you're asking after the prom if somebody got it, you would not know.
Is the Langley County Health Department's numbers and reporting in DHS then indicative of being able to understand that better? Because that's what I've reviewed, is have the numbers spiked for our district?
I think we were last week, no, I don't have this week's data, but I think it was probably beginning of last week, our rates were slightly below the state, this is as of May 7th, we were at 80.9 per 100,000. And that was compared to Wisconsin's burden of illness was 150 per 100,000. And case activity is still high is what the Langley County Department said. But this was the beginning of last week, or middle of last week. So we could probably check with them if they have updated numbers which will come up at the end of this week.
Yes, thank you.
Also, Julie, you also just said that we've loosened the restrictions on our outdoor spring sports. Some students do wear, some students don't wear.
I was actually referring to spectators,
Yeah.
Danny, but.
Well, driving around, I see the students also not wearing, out doing spring
Right.
sports as well. So what this is doing, this is just saying, making it optional. If somebody wants to wear it, by all means, wear the mask. If somebody doesn't want to wear it, then don't wear it. It's just like what we're doing currently with our softball, baseball, and track season that's going on. So if we clamp down on graduation, then we better start clamping down on all the spring sports too.
And that was a WIAA ruling, and of course, we followed their lead, but I understand what you're saying.
Which is interesting because
800 people in a potentially in a
Yeah,
space
the
of
mass
two
gathering
versus
is the differential,
16.
of course, yeah.
Well, it's interesting when you look at the WIAA recommendations, is if you can at social distance and things like that. So on the one hand, we're doing CDC guidelines, on the other hand, we're doing WIAA recommendations. So I feel like when we keep kind of going back and forth.
We're setting rules for what we want.
Yeah.
And like Dr. Deep has already said many times, there's no number on what's considered a mass gathering. 50 people could be a mass gathering to some. 800 people could be a mass gathering. So you can't define a mass gathering. There's no definition out there.
And I worry about safety too. How many of us have been outside when it's 85 degrees and sunny in the middle of the afternoon? Because I am required to wear a mask as well. So I've worked outside all summer professionally. And dehydration and heat, I'm concerned about that being a factor too. I mean, I don't know, Dr. Deep, if you have anything to share, and that's just my own personal experience of dehydration, overheating, you're going to pass out. So I'm just saying, like, some other considerations if I think about the population of who's going to come to attend the graduation ceremony.
another thing I just want to add, I'm not a doctor, I'm sitting next to my doctor. And, but I sat at home with what's that machine on your finger?
The pulse ox.
Yeah, and I sat at home with a mask on and just watched my O2 go down to 90 for the couple minutes that I was wearing, 5-10 minutes I was wearing the mask. And then when I took it off, then it went back up.
I'm just going to interject here that I'm just leaving for work purposes.
Okay.
Oh, so you're not voting on this?
Yeah, I got to make some money this year.
How convenient.
So I guess I just want to be clear that I respect what our district has done, and we've worked very, very hard, and I appreciate those efforts. And so I also feel like one area that we have not focused on, we have not gathered feedback on, is what our students, parents, and taxpayers, what their feedback is too. And I would like to give them the opportunity to have that option to wear a mask if they feel most comfortable wearing a mask, or not wearing a mask if that is what they choose.
There's no time. You know, I mean, it's graduation's in 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks. You know, to get their input.
Well, you would get their input by how they show up, whether they wear a mask or they don't,
Yeah.
you know? I mean, because then we're putting it on them to make that individual decision for themselves, without also judging if they don't wear a mask, because again, we haven't addressed if there's a medical exemption where somebody cannot wear a mask, how we're gonna, or I guess we have, sorry, I backtracked that, yeah. Trying to-
Interesting, I've had COVID. I got it at Elko School District, working one-on-one with a student, teaching them algebra. And it was the first student in Elko High School to get it, and because I worked one-on-one and had a mask on, and she had a mask on, we both got COVID, because she gave it to me. Because the virus droplets are smaller than anything this mask stops. I never wear a mask, ever. I have cancer. Having surgery tomorrow. And I don't wear a mask except when I'm at the hospital and when I walk into these school buildings. I have a monthly get-together with 5 other people in Wausau, once a month. Some are family, some are not. I went to the Langley County Republican Lincoln Day dinner. 264 people, including Ron Johnson, Tom Tiffany, Mary Felskowski, not one person wearing a mask. Went into Lakeside Pharmacy today, and as an almost 70-year-old who has all kinds of medications, I go in there a lot. I never wear a mask. And guess what I saw today? Everyone in the pharmacy, everyone, not wearing a mask, because they've made a decision they don't have to. And they're the one dispensing our drugs. It's our constitutional right to make choices that are good for us. And that's why I brought this forward, because these kids deserve to make a choice on their own. Their parents, who have looked forward to graduation day for many, many years, deserve a choice whether they want to wear a mask or not to. Jake has done a great job separating everybody. And I hope we give these parents and their children a chance to enjoy a graduation without masks if they so desire.
I'm just going to loop it back to what I said, where you brought up constitutional rights, and I'll just bring it back to where the board was given the power to make decisions. That's our state rights. We were given powers by the state to enact certain rules and responsibilities. And when I'm sitting up here, at the forefront of my mind is, how do I keep students safe? That is my primary concern whenever I am up here. And I can't remember who it was, Dr. Deep or Dr. McKenna, someone had mentioned that it's our responsibility to protect our most vulnerable communities. And I feel that if we do not take a stand and say that we need to mandate masks, we are letting down those vulnerable communities. And whether or not people are going to be wearing them appropriately or whatever the argument is against it, I think what our decision that we make tonight, I hope that everyone here is remembering that we are here to protect student welfare and well-being and to support student education. And it's difficult for students to properly educate themselves or make decisions, that kind of stuff, if they're dealing with adverse interpersonal conflicts like the death of a family member or dealing with adverse health complications. So I don't want to keep rambling on, so I'm done.
And my feedback to that is we're putting the burden of life or death on 18-year-olds. I don't know that.
We're taking that away by saying that they need to wear a mask.
Because if they don't, when they go to their graduation party,
But that's their personal choice. If they want to go to a party afterwards, at least here we're saying.
I don't disagree.
This is a school-sponsored event where we have a responsibility. It's an honor.
As softball and baseball and track is too.
Yeah.
That they don't wear masks.
And it should be enforced if that's the case.
This is the
And that's the first time I've heard of it too.
Because we're going off the WIA recommendations. So that's where I think it's inconsistent, is when are we following the recommendations and guidelines from one agency, then another agency, which this one differs, so.
And there has been give and take during this whole pandemic. We make the best decisions we can based on the information we have at that time. And the board did endorse following WIAA. However, we were allowed at the indoor season, opposing teams had to come here and we were masked, so they had to be masked. Now, with outdoor sports, that has changed. And again, to go back to the differential, this is a mass gathering. I thought Darlene had indicated a number, Danny, but I don't remember what it is based on.
There's not a number out there that says what a mass gathering is, I don't believe.
But I believe 800 people would be considered a mass gathering.
Yeah, if you look at the definitions, it's anytime if it's more than your immediate family members.
We talked, we can sit and talk in
Right.
circles here,
Yeah.
but yes, I understand both sides, but the kids deserve the option to make the choice. And I am part of that vulnerable population, so it's my choice if I go somewhere and wear a mask. And the kids got enough taken away from them. They're outside. My sister runs music festivals where people are touching and close and hugging and singing. Not one case has come out of that. So I feel by us saying it's okay to choose, that's going to speak louder than anything to our students.
Okay, so.
Call the question.
Okay, we'll just do a voice vote then. I think
I move for roll call.
Move for roll call? Okay.
You betcha.
All right.
I'm going to be first.
Otto,
Yes.
Deep,
No.
Paddock Nelson,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Neufeld,
No.
Schrader,
No.
Zimmerman,
Yes.
Balzer,
No.
It's a tie, the motion fails.
So, 4-4, the motion does not pass.
I'd like for those votes to be published in the paper, who voted and how they voted, if that is possible.
I think that's a fair request.
I'm sorry?
I think that's a fair request. I've had a lot of
Absolutely. There's
community
been a lot of
members reach
community
out.
members that are asking for that.
I think it's fair.
It's reasonable.
And then what happens?
Very convenient for the president.
I'd like to say I'm displeased with our president for walking out in the middle of the discussion. He should have left before the discussion even started on this motion.
All right. Next up, we have D, consideration to allow certified staff movement on existing salary schedule for the 2021-2022 school year.
I move the board allows certified staff to move on the existing salary schedule for the 2021-2022 school year.
Second that.
Does anyone have any questions regarding it? We're just saying this is the approved schedule that we presented back in December. We're not adding it to the base. The only thing that we would add is we have one or two individuals that are at the top end of the schedule, and they would receive CPI just to hold them current.
So this will be a voice vote? Okay.
Steve,
Yes.
Maddox Nelson,
Yes.
Newfeld,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Schrader,
Yes.
Zimmerman,
Yes.
Bartle,
Yes.
Balzer,
Yes. Okay. Next up, E, consideration to approve track resurfacing material pricing increase.
I move the board accept the running track resurfacing material pricing increase with the total price not to exceed $160,000 to be expended out of Fund 46 in July 2021.
I'll second that.
Questions or comments on
With that explanation, and it's because of what happened in Texas.
Yeah, I guess the one comment I'd like to make is, if you look at that first page from Bretler Corporation, we've used them a lot in the past. They're a great firm to help design our projects. They actually designed the initial track install when we built it when the school was built. They do wonderful work, and I had a lot of reserve about this. Bid should be a bid type theory. And I spent a lot of time with him, kind of beating him up and saying that this shouldn't be an added increase, and if it were roles reversed, would they just take lesser payment? And, I tried to work everything we could, and at the end of the day, the conversation came to the point where the actual material increase from documentation from the manufacturer of the product, not the installer that won the bid, is $18,000. They're taking a portion of that hit because they want to be fair, so they're reducing their margin on that. Then secondly, I said, what if there's a company out there that pre-bought all this material and has it sitting in their warehouse? They would be able to provide better pricing, or one of the original bidders would have been able to hold the pricing, and the shelf life of this product is, they don't like to let it go past 5 months. So in this industry, they don't have companies that hold this. It's made more on a as-needed basis. So there's didn't seem to be an option there. So at the end of the day, we could have rejected the bids and reopened it to try to get a better price. But Ross and I both believe that it would have been an $18,000 increase at the end of the day instead of the 30. So I think that is reasonable. I appreciate that they're willing to work with us, but, you know, never like to hear that it's going to be more. Questions?
Jake, thanks for doing all that legwork for that.
My job.
All right, we'll go ahead with the voice vote, roll call.
Maddox Nelson,
Yes.
Newfeld,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Schrader. Schrader,
Yes.
Zimmerman,
Yes.
Pardo,
Yes.
Deep,
Yes.
and Balzer.
Yes. Okay, that passes, and then we will just confirm the next, let's see, confirm next meeting time and location as Tuesday, June 8th, 2021, 6 p.m. at Anago Middle School. And can I get a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right.